Hi and welcome to this video in the MRDCL Understanding Concept series, and in this video we're going to look at finding errors in your preprocessor code. It's something that can trouble people sometimes and can be difficult to locate, but with a few tips you might find you can save a lot of time and track down your errors very quickly. So we're just going to look at the preprocessor in this video. You'll find the files used in the folder pre-102. So let's first of all start by making some fairly simple deliberate errors in this script. First of all, I'm going to run it just to prove to you that when it compiles it works okay. This is pretty similar to the script used in the full tutorial on how to use the preprocessor, with just one or two little bits of code added so that you can see some particular errors that I want to demonstrate to you. So let's start with a very simple error. Let's say that here we've got a data statement 4000, and let's say I accidentally put the wrong number in here. I put 4001 or 400. Let's look at how we identify that error. Now, with all preprocessor errors, they're fatal, because what the preprocessor is that it expands your code as though you typed in a long version of it before it actually does any compilation. So you'll never get a compilation running if you've got a preprocessor error. So let's run this. And I get this message up here. I've got an error and it's telling me that the index name is not found, or contains some faulty characters, and it's referring to 4001. And I get some clues at this screen. Now, one thing I often do when I'm trying to fix preprocessor error is to expand this box here, because it just makes it a bit easier to read, because this information here usually points you to where the problem lies. And you can already see here that it's telling me the problem is at line 20. It's telling me that 4000 has got 5 data items, and it's also telling me something I find very useful here, that a equals to 1. Now, when you get an error coming out with a equal to 1 in that particular line in the file, it's a very good clue that the loop just isn't starting. It's not crashing for something that happens in the middle. It's happening before it even can get going. It's told me here it's statement 4001 it can't find, and there's a reference up here to 4001. So I'm pretty clear where the error is. Let's go to line 20 and see if it finds it. And sure enough, if I go to line 20, it tells me that this is the line with the error and immediately points me to 4001, and this should be a very simple error to correct. I do prefer using an editor that tells you what line the problem is, because this really helps you find errors. I'm using a program called WinVi as my editor here. There are plenty of others, and that tells me now that I'm in line 20, character 1, and as I arrow across you can see this character here steps up. So all I've got to do now is change that to 0, and my error goes away and the run will compile. If I had any errors in the logic of my syntax, they would obviously come out now in my compilation. But before, when I had an error in the preprocessor, it didn't get any further. So let's look at another error now. Let's look at failing to close a data statement. What happens there? Well, what's going to happen, it's going to keep reading until it finds something that tells it it's not working properly. So it's easy to miss off that sort of thing. Let's see what happens. I get an error message, end of command not found, and it tells me that what I've got here is that, here's my clue this time, always read the messages at the screen, that 4000 is a data step with 0 items. Well, that looks very suspicious to me, so it's never really closed that, and there's something going on that it entered the code at line 8. So here's the line 8 where it entered that code, and sure enough, it's quite quick to see then that because it had nothing in that data statement, it was probably something to do with opening or closing that. It knew it was in data 4000, but it had no items in there. Alright, so let's try something else, and let's do something that I do quite a lot. I often miss off a star off my do loop, so I just type in do A 1 to 5. Anybody who uses any other programming languages can easily get confused with that. So let's see what happens when we do that. Again, I get an error message, and there's some telltale signs here. This time the data statement looks fine. It's line 13, position 5. But I get this strange message here of do A as one word. Now MRDCL is closing that all together, And along here, that's quite hard to spot. It has got do A equals without the star, but we might not still spot it there. And it's in line 13 that there seems to be a problem. Let's look at line 13, and sure enough, it's absolutely bang on where the error is, and I can now see that that's my error. And it didn't have any values for A below because it didn't even get as far as having a value of 1 or 2 or any other value for A. So that has hopefully fixed my error. I seem to have made an error myself here, and now it's compiled. All right, let's look at the next thing. Now, sometimes you can make quite complex errors or ones that are really difficult to spot. So here, I've set an index called count statements, and let's say I just happen to miss one letter, something that's not easy to spot at first sight. Let's have a look at what happens now. I get an error, and I get some good clues here. I can see that count statements has 11 things in it, but count statements has a null value. Now, getting that null might be a warning to me that something's going on. I also get the line number here, 42. So I've got some clues here. A is also null because that loop is closed, but that might be a clue that the index here having a value null, when the one I know about, count statements, is a value 11 up here, looks very suspicious. So let's go to line 42, and you can see it's taken me exactly to the line that the problem is, and I can now spot that error and correct it in the way I want to. Let's compile again, and it's fixed the error. All right, let's make another error now. Now, it's quite easy in a loop to specify the wrong number of things. This loop here is pulling in at this statement here, brand.b. So from the data statement brand up here, it's pulling in the first, second, or third item. Let's see what happens if I get that loop wrong and I ask for 4 items, and let's run it. Error message, and now I get some messages coming out. Now, what's a little bit interesting about this is it's saying here, if we go to line 49, 45, it's pointing me at this line, but that might not put me exactly on the spot. Certainly putting me at 45 tells me it's that B loop that's the problem, but that still might not help me. Let's go back to the messages at the screen. I can see that my loop has a value of 1, B has a value of 4, and C has a value of 5. And when I go back to the script, it's obviously come out the C loop because C is retaining a value of 5. My loop is 1, so that's the first time round. But there's a clue here that B is erroring when it's 4. So often loops error when you start. So if B had a value of 1, it would mean there's something wrong with the entire loop. But here B's value 4. So it's got round 3 times, but on the fourth occasion, there's a problem. And so it would mean that I've either missed something in this data statement, I should have a 4th thing in here, or as we found in that case, it should have been 3. And that is the fix to my problem and corrects the error. Now, closing loops is something that is easy to do and can make things more difficult to find. I'm first of all going to close this loop, or fail to close this loop at the top. Let's see what happens. And you can see it's made some quite good progress here, and the messages aren't quite as clear. If I look at 54.7, which is the message it's giving me, you'll see that actually where it errors is when it comes to open the A loop again, because it's possible that actually this was the end of the loop. It could have had all that code that's inside looping around as many times, because you can have loops within loops within loops within MRDCL. So this is rather strange. It's crashed when it says 4A here, which leads me to believe it's the A loop that's the problem. I go back to my code here, and actually it's crashing when A equals 1. So it's now starting to give me some clues as to what the problem is. And this is a little bit harder to spot, but I now know that it's probably my A loop it's the problem. The fact it's crashing on this line of code when the first value for A is 10, but the A value is 1, is a sign to me that something is going wrong with A. So I would now look for do A, or for A, And sure enough, I can find that one. There's no other do A until very much at the bottom. So this looks like the suspicious loop to me. And this is a little bit harder to find, but I would see hopefully quite quickly that the end A is the line that's missing. But that one's a little bit harder to spot. Compile again, and it works. Even harder to spot occasionally is when you've got to fail to close a loop at the end of the script. So here it's going through, and this time it tells me the error is at line 65. So let's look at that. Line 65. So it's here that it's hitting a problem, and that's my clue that there's a failure to close this loop, so that even though it's going round it the first time, it's not finding, by the time it hits the finish here, or the finish of this whole script, it's not finding anywhere to close it. And so if we go back here, we'll see that A is stuck on a value of 4 because it can't actually get any further than that. So it's stuck on the value of 4. And indeed, this is the problem, that I've forgotten to close it. And my code has an error, which I've now corrected, and it's compiled. This doesn't by any means help with every single error you'll get, but it does show you that by looking at the messages, you can quite quickly become very adept at spotting the errors that you have in your preprocessor script. To learn more about the preprocessor, you should watch the other videos in this series, but I hope this video is helpful for finding errors, but it's not really there for teaching you how to use the preprocessor. Thanks for joining me.